Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Test. 1, 2, 3. Let's get unbothered.
Everything bothers him.
He's unbothered.
He calls it unbothered, but that's what's cute because everything bothers him. He's bothered. I'm a botherina.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Unbothered by Thai Rivera. I'm your host, Thai Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world, and this is the most inconsistent podcast in the world. No edits, so every once in a while I'm gonna misspeak. Welcome to me being human, you guys. I know you see me as this perfect thing. Okay, stop the laughter. Stop the laughter. It was just an opening. I'm just trying to open the show for you guys because I've got stuff to talk about today. And I decided to make that the beginning because that's how obnoxious my sound check is with my mics. I tried to fix the settings so hopefully the sound is better because sound's so important to me. But I'm not going to get into that because who cares? Inside baseball, behind the scenes stuff, nobody cares. But this probably isn't the spot where I'm going to do Unbothered. If anybody ever wonders, because like sometimes friends will come over to my place because I don't have like just strangers coming over to my place. I'm not that type of person. Once in a while, a gentleman caller will come. Once in a while, but that's not like... I'm a person that really does live where I live. Like I'm very, I've gotten really good about being more organized. Right now, my place is a mess. One day I'll talk about why this week has been so stressful for me, but I don't really want to talk about that because I'm not bothered by it. And the podcast is called Unbothered. And for anybody that's like new around here, if you don't know why I called my podcast Unbothered, the reason that it's called Unbothered is because it's me talking about things that bother me until they don't bother me anymore. Like that's a lot of times what I'm talking about. And sometimes I don't stick to that like template. I'm not always talking about things that bother me, but a lot of times it really is. Like, you know, this week I met a guy last week and we're kind of chatting and we'll see where it goes and I'll talk about that a little bit. But, you know, one thing a lot of people don't get about me is I have a true mantra that I live by. And what I was going to say about my chair really quick is sometimes people ask me why I have a dad recliner, you know, and they'll joke that way. But this is one, I am a dad. I've got a puppy and I've always had, well, you know, for the last probably 13, 14 years now, I've had dogs. I love having dogs, which we'll talk about that in a second too, because I just got through doing a project. But to stick to why I have this chair, one, I am a dad, but more importantly, this is my editing chair, and it was super expensive, and it's great, but this isn't me flexing because it was one of those things where I bought it because I was like, I'm gonna get really good use out of this, and this chair really has paid for itself in the comfort it's allowed me in editing, because that's mainly what I do in this chair. Is when I'm watching TV, I just usually sit on the couch, you know, or lay on the couch really with my dog on my lap. But when I'm actually editing videos, like the videos that you watch, this chair is where I edit them from. And I've started forcing myself to go from the couch to my bedroom, and because for a long time, in each apartment, the Austin apartment and here, I've been sleeping on the couch all the time. But the reason that I got a 2-bedroom apartment, because obviously it's just me and a small dog, so I could have easily gotten a 1-bedroom apartment and been 100% fine. But the reason that I got a 2-bedroom apartment was because I wanted one room to be like a studio for me to record content, my content room, you could call it. And then the other room would be set up as an actual bedroom. And I just felt like that would help me be more organized, because if you remember the way that I had my setup in Austin, a lot of times I would show it, I would have it where it would be like the bed behind me and the puppies would be playing on the bed. And so some people really did like that. And I really did like that too. I thought that was cute, but I never really thought about it until it happened. You know, it wasn't like part of the plan, like, oh, I'm going to be doing this and my dogs are going to be playing in the background. Dogs are always going to be dogs. And that's one of the things I love about them, is that they have no awareness of like, I have to behave in this particular situation. If they behave, well, they do if you train them, you know, and my dogs are always well behaved in public. Baby girl, not as much as Bijou, but it's because baby girl really wasn't socialized very well, and that was my fault, because when I first got baby girl, it was right off of the heartbreak of Bijou dying. I think it was 9 days later or something like that that I ended up getting baby girl. And it's because I really do feel like, you know, there's different types of people in the world. And I'm a person that one friend that I don't talk to anymore described me as always alone but never lonely. And that's a good description for me, because I will miss a particular person. Like right now, Leonarda Joni, believe it or not, is one of the people that I need to talk to soon. But I don't miss her in an unhealthy way. And there's no pressure to our friendship. Like when we get to talk, we get to talk. When we are both too busy, that's not something that I long for. I'm not like, oh my God, I just wish Leonarda would call me right now. Or, I mean, like if I want to get a hold of Leonarda, I'll send her a text or we'll call. And she's, you know, she gets that about me too. And that's, I think, why we're good friends, is because we don't really pressure people like that, each other like that. Like I'm doing a lot with my content and it takes a long time for the editing. I talked about that on other videos before, but like a short video will be like 4 to 6 hours of editing, or, you know, from the whole process, 4 to 6 hours. Like a long video, and one that I do a bunch of external media, you know, like clips and stuff like that for, that will be like between 8 and 10 hours, depending on the video, for editing and recording. And that's not, like in neither of those do I factor in the time I do researching, which, you know, researching is obviously me being online and going to several articles. And so, you know, and I do, like, I try to be as accurate as I possibly can. And yeah, I'm always going to have a slant and a bias because I'm a human being and I'm not trying to lie to anybody and act like I'm CNN News. I'm not news. I am current events, and I like to give you guys my actual opinion. And that's why I was going to talk about the fact that sometimes people get mad at me, but I do have a very solid policy for my life, and you'll notice it in the themes and the way that I talk about things. And sometimes people get mad at me, but my true default position is to always blame the victim, especially if the victim is you. And when I'm saying that, I'm talking about myself. Like, this is really the way that I live my life, because the world isn't gonna change. What you can change is the way that you react to the world. What you can change is the way that you handle yourself moving forward in those same types of situations, because what you find is that people are very unoriginal. And so the same game that somebody tries to run on you today is the one they're going to try to run on you 2 years from now. Or the same way that people will behave in certain social situations is something that's going to happen again. I guarantee it. Like, you notice that in your own life, you know, where you're like archetypes in certain cases, you know. A lot of times I'll think of like Real Housewives, like that kind of situation, which a lot of people are into in a very toxic way. And I don't mean the show Real Housewives, even though I am referencing the show, just to be clear. But I mean, a lot of people choose to live that way in their regular lives, where they always want to feel like they're in a reality show. And so they're in constant strife and constant battle with people. And some people think that that's the way my life is. And people don't understand about my life that I do not live in that. Like, a lot of times, even when you see me arguing online, as soon as I put down my phone or as soon as I stop with the laptop, that all stops. And even when I'm doing it, a lot of times, if you read the things that I'm saying, one of the reasons people find that entertaining when I argue on the different platforms, because I argue on X sometimes, I argue on Facebook occasionally, all of it less and less because I have less and less time for it. But I really used to be known for that, was like clapbacks. And I am really good at clapbacks because it's just always had to be a part of my life. Even before I started doing stand-up, before I had a social media, any of that stuff, I've always been like good at clapbacks because I've always had to be, because I've always hung out with really sharp people. And with me and my friends, we were never even trying to cut on each other, because I won't hang out with people that are toxic, truly. Like in my personal life, with me and my friends, one thing I think most people would be, well, I don't know if people would be, so I'm projecting right now. I just assume that people have these ideas about me. And then sometimes when I meet people in person, they'll tell me the same thing. Like when friends, like new friends, will come to my place, or, you know, we'll be hanging out in like a setting that's not at all entertainment related, you know, not like a comedy club after a show or an open mic or whatever it is I'm doing. It's not like that. Like a lot of times what I'll do if I really like somebody, obviously, in that friendship way, I'm trying to be very clear about these things, because there's so many places where people get me like, they'll misconstrue the things I'm saying. Which I'm very fortunate with that when it comes to Unbothered and the audience that I have here, is that like you guys really do seem to get me in that way, where it's not like a thing where I do have to explain. But then there's always new people. But when I have people over to my place, they're usually surprised at like how chill everything is. Because I think they had imagined that because of my online presence that I live a very chaotic life. And that's just not at all my vibe. Like when I'm with my friends, we rib each other a lot, and we'll make age jokes and not AIDS. We'll make age jokes. We'll make, jokes about appearance on occasions. We'll call each other fat, because all of us, because there's my two friends, Thomasina and Derequisha. Thomas and Derek are my two best friends, and we're on a group chat. And inevitably, one of us will post a food post on our stories on Instagram, because that's where we do a lot of, every once in a while we'll take it to group text, but usually we keep it on Instagram. But we'll send each other, or not even send each other. This is the worst part about it, right? This is how shady we are with each other. Is one of us will be like at a restaurant and post on our story, just like, this is what I'm eating, or like, just a quick picture of it. And then somebody will share that post in the group, somebody that's not that person, and we'll be like, no wonder your fat ass always has to be in the gym. And we'll have a lot of fun with it, But we don't truly try to cut each other down. And we are a group that, when it comes down to it, we are happy for each other's happiness and happy for each other's accomplishments. And there are plenty of shady, but nonetheless, congratulations on our post, when somebody like either gets a job or hits a particular goal or has a particular accomplishment or is looking particularly good, then we are like very quick to, congratulate each other. But again, in a shady and fun way a lot of times, like a friend of mine is currently, well, one of my friends, I should say, is currently negotiating a salary for a new job. And, we congratulated, and then I was like, when do you start? And they were like, we're still working out the details as far as the pay and stuff like that. And then I just commented back, but her lube budget will not be changing. And but it's like, that's what I mean, but it's all fun. And so I don't understand when I see people, and sorry that my camera is crooked today, but I didn't really, it's called Unbothered for a reason. I can't be bothered, girl. But and usually I have stuff hanging up back there so that wall doesn't look empty, because I put like my coat back there, and then, or my hoodie, whatever the season is. And then also a lot of times I have my hat on that hook. You can see that little hook right there. That little hook is where I usually hang my hat. But yeah, and so I don't really understand that. Like when people like roll their eyes when a friend they're hanging out with walks out of the room, and then they're like, girl, you know she's blah, 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 blah. And I'm just in my head like, I just couldn't imagine being that friend or hanging out with those kinds of people. I have very little to say about my friends when they walk out of a room. And that's something anybody that knows me will tell you is 100% true. I'm not that person that's like, oh, well, you know, really what's going on with him is, and it's like, why would you do that? And then why would you hang out with people like that? Why would you subject yourself to that? Because for me, it's like, my dad raised me and my sisters to know that, like, because he didn't like us fighting at home. You know, brothers and sisters are always going to argue and bicker and whatever else. But when it came to like actually fighting, like ripping on each other, which I think is part of growing up in a lot of cases, unless you just grow up in a really serene family, which congratulations if you did. But, you know, me and my sisters occasionally would really get into it. That's all I have is sisters. And so we would occasionally really get into it. And my dad, one of the most common things he would tell us growing up, he would say this a lot to remind us. And he would just basically say, like, the world already is going to try to tear you down. So why would you guys try to tear each other down here at home? And when you're young, yeah, maybe you'll keep fighting, you know, you'll keep arguing, whatever it is you're doing. But there's going to be, there's going to be a point where that does make sense to you. And like the other day, I gave some advice on not parenting, because I don't have children. And so I speak from the position of the child in a lot of things that I talk about, you know? So if I give advice ever to parents, I'm not giving you advice like saying, oh, this is how you should raise your kids, because I don't have kids and I wish I did. But, well, one kid, but I don't. And I don't like think that I could tell you how to raise children, even though I saw my nieces and nephews and I had a bit of a hand in their raising, you know, because their mom died when they were young. And so, and also even before that, they were always around us, you know, we're that kind of family. And so, like, I don't ever come at it that way. So one time around Christmas, I did a video and I was talking about parent, like from the kid side, and how parents, like should remember certain things as far as, like, you know, it was about humanizing yourself to your kids, because a lot of times your children don't see you as human beings. They see you as just kind of these people that it's their job to love you, if you're like me, because I was very much loved, but also just give you things and clothe you and feed you. And you don't think about the fact that sometimes your parents are struggling, and sometimes that's financially, sometimes it's mentally, sometimes it's just, it's emotionally, it's everything. Sometimes it's being a human being, which never occurred to me when I was a kid, obviously, because that's not the way you think when you're a kid. But there have been times when I've been an adult paying my own bills where I was like, my dad did this times 5, basically, because, you know, he had my mom and then he had me and he had my 3 sisters. And so he had to make sure that all of us were taken care of, including himself. And that meant, you know, paying all the bills. And I never sell my mom short on any level, because my mom, when I say my mom was a true housewife, she was a true housewife, cooking, cleaning, starching clothes, making sure our faces shoes were clean. We never looked a mess. She would right away get on us about hair to sometimes unhealthy degree about just, if you ask me, which nothing against her, like we're all human beings. And that's the other thing. Like I feel nothing negative towards my parents in their older age. And when I look back on the way that I was raised, and I do excuse a lot of things because I realize that my parents and everybody else, it's like when you know better, you do better. So when I was younger, you would get spanked, right? And that was a very normal thing. Everybody I knew had gotten a spanking at some point in their life or would get spankings on the regular. My parents weren't really heavy-handed in the way that they raised us, so we weren't getting spanked all the time. But it also wasn't completely out of the question and uncommon. It wasn't like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. It was like I said, it was not all the time, and we definitely were not on any level at all abused. But one time I had a friend that's a psychiatrist kind of try to convince me that I should be upset with my parents for when they spanked me when I was younger, and basically tell me that I was doing what all victims do, where you try to justify. And I was like, no, I was a bad kid at certain points because I went through a very, very bad phase. And I'm glad that me and my parents came out on the other side the way that we did. And I think it is a testament to how much my parents loved me and how much they were willing to just kind of trust the process and accept that that was just a part of me growing up. I once threw a TV through a window, and that's no lie. And the police had to get me because the police were there for me because I had created a disturbance at my own parents' house. And I don't remember if the neighbors called the police or if my parents called the police, or for all I know, I called the police. I think that time I did. Notice how I said that time. This is how bad I was when I was young. And I'm not proud of it, but also I don't think it does any good to try to sugarcoat things. And I always also say that that's how you learn to do the right things, is by doing the wrong things. A lot of us, that's how we learn, is by first we do things, in a way that we look back on and we don't respect and we don't like. And then that's how we learn. And it's kind of that shame that will change your behavior in some cases, where you look back and you're just sort of like, yeah, why was I like that? But I had called the police. Now I remember the way this story went. I was super drunk, and it was before I even should have been drinking. I think I was like 13 years old, and I had called the police because my parents wouldn't let me leave the house again. And mind you, I was drunk, like super drunk. And Bacardi and Coke when I was young. 13 years old, I was drinking Coke and Bacardi. No lie. That was like my regular drink. But of course, you're just learning to drink because you're young. And so you don't gauge it on any level and get way too drunk. Or that's what I did, was I got way too drunk every time I would drink. It was a mess. It was an actual situation. And so my parents wouldn't let me leave, and I called the police, and the police said, if your parents say you can't leave, you can't leave. We're not going to take you. I mean, and also, where would we take you? Because the only place we're taking people is to jail. And I grew up in a small town, or a smaller community, I should say. Not small town, I have to be clear about that, because I have friends that come from like one light towns. But my town is small enough that there is one main drag. And I don't mean drag like, bitches getting in makeup and that. I have to be very careful about that because, that isn't popular right now. But there's one main drag. It's Main Boulevard, and that's kind of where a lot of stuff is. There's a downtown area, which is very small. But the way that I grew up was the police all, because it's that kind of small town and you go to school with their kids and stuff like that, they're your classmates. Me and my family were very familiar with police on a respectable level, not like that getting in trouble all the time level. Like, Officer Jim would come to the school and, he had a talking car, which I didn't realize. When you're a kid, you don't realize that it's just a car with a PA in it that's like projecting. I can't remember the name of the car, but yeah, Officer Jim. And so, and then our dare officer arrested me once. It wasn't on drugs though, but he did arrest me once. But yeah, so they said they couldn't take me, and I wanted them to take me because I just wanted to leave, and they refused. And so when they were leaving, I grabbed the TV because it was one of those old school TVs. At the time, it was the new TV, but it was an old school TV, and it was a smaller one, and it had the little handles where you could put your hands in there. And I remember grabbing it by the handles and just throwing it. And it was one of those windows that has like the metal inside, so it didn't go through the window, it just broke the window. And then I picked it up and I threw it again against the windows, and it broke again. It kept shattering. And so then I remember the police running in, and they rushed me and took me down and took me to jail. And I don't remember how long I was in jail because, when I was young, I had a couple of times like that. And this was, like I said, 13, those ages. So it's not like any of this stayed on my record, fortunately. But yeah, so my point is, and my parents weren't spanking me at that point, but when I was younger, there were times, but that's kind of when my dad realized that spanking me wasn't going to be an effective strategy anymore. And he had an actual conversation with me about that when I was young. And I think that's also part of why I don't harbor hard feelings towards my parents. Because my dad, who was in a lot of cases the disciplinarian, because my mom was the caretaker, and so she would, put my dad on it when, especially me, because I was a boy, being too much for her, because at a point, I'm too much for my mom. That's just what it is. I mean, I'm sure she could have handled herself, but how I mean, I wasn't that bad. I'll tell you that. It wasn't like, I was thinking about taking my mom down. I laugh, but it's unfortunate. There are people that actually do think that way. There are stories where that happens, where, grown men or men, obviously at 13, I'm not grown, but men are abusing their mothers, in some cases. And so we didn't have those problems. But there was a point where my dad told me that, that he was going to not spank me anymore, and he was sorry for the last time that he had, because, and this was after we had a bout where I got a good spanking. Actually, that one was kind of funny to me to this day. And I've talked about it in my sets. And like I said, if you're a person that is, because I never mind comments. I love when people comment and stuff like that. And I'm going to be in the live chat when we're doing this and stuff. But you don't have to be one of those people that, apologizes to me or tells me that I should have expected, or any of that stuff. Because, for me, it's just a funny story the way that it went down, because it's very dated too, and now kids aren't going through this, or a lot of children aren't going through this anymore, and I'm happy for them that it's not like that anymore. But like I said, as a society, when we know better, we do better. And so when I was younger, spankings were the regular thing. When my parents were younger, pretty much abuse was the thing. If you guys know, or if you guys ever talk to anybody from the boomer generation, and it's not everybody, but a lot of people really dealt with what by today's standards would be considered abuse. Like, my mom comes from a family that was so and I don't think she would mind me saying this, so I'm not talking out of turn. And my uncles and my aunts, if they were ever stumble on this video, one, I don't really care what they think, and two, I think that they would be honest. And when I say I don't care what they think, it's not like in a really defiant way, but it's like, we don't talk all the time. If you're one of my uncles and my aunts, or my aunts watching this video, you don't regularly watch my stuff. You don't regularly talk to me. I mean, we're cool, but I'm not changing the way that I talk because of people that I don't see on any regular basis. I don't change the way I talk for people that I do see on a regular basis. But my mom dealt with things like if she would get in trouble, they'd put rice on the ground and she had to kneel on it. Her and her brothers and sisters had to kneel on it. That was one of the punishments. Or the kind of sitting in a chair that's not there against the wall. These are torture. These are technically torture techniques, like a lot of what they went through. And actual beatings, like beatings, not, and so, then you evolve to where I was, where it's more like controlled spankings, which isn't, now, like I said, we know better. But what happened was, one time I had done something pretty terrible, and I can't remember what it was, because I would tell you, because if you can't tell, I don't mind telling these stories. But I had done something terrible. And I remember my mom took off her chancla, and I'm not being a Mexican hack right here. This is just the way the story went down. And she was so mad, and I don't blame her, because this was a buildup. And like I said, my mom was not the disciplinarian. So it wasn't like my mom had regularly spanked me or hit me or anything like that. But I was just trying everybody, because I was a young boy growing into being a teenager and really figuring myself out, and I think by this time I was probably 14, and I was very advanced in the way that I started smoking when I was 12, like smoking cigarettes. Started, with the, taking cigarettes from my friend's grandpa. Well, I didn't take the cigarettes. My friend would get the cigarettes from his grandpa, steal them out of the pack and then bring them to us. And then we'd all be bad and smoking together. But it wasn't until 13, because I was at 12, it wasn't until 13 that I started actually buying my own cigarettes or giving people money so that they would buy me cigarettes, because in the town I grew up in, that was very normal. And it wasn't even considered a thing. Like, now people are like, yeah, you can look back and be like, yeah, they probably shouldn't have been buying us alcohol. But friends' parents would buy us alcohol. Friends' parents would buy us cigarettes. My parents were never part of that at all. But, we would always get our hands on stuff. And so my mom had dealt with me, really just trying her over and over and over, and never ever learning anything, me never learning anything, and just getting harder and more, defiant. And so there was a point where one time she just got so mad and she took off her chancla, and I remember I had this bed, and it was like a loft, and there was a futon underneath it, but the bed was an actual loft bed above me, which I always loved loft beds. Sometimes I think about getting one now, but beside the point. I had one when I was in LA. Absolutely loved it. Me and Bijou used to sleep in that loft bed. So great together. We really loved that loft bed. But anyway, so I remember her grabbing her chancla and just finally she really went at me. I mean, I did get a black eye that time. She lost it. She lost it. She was out of control. She was nuts. I was scared. I wasn't, I was just covering and making sure I didn't sustain too much damage or whatever. But at the same time, because I have very vivid memories. My dad laughs about the things that I remember, but I have very vivid memories of moments like that. And some would say it's from trauma. Okay, cool. That's what it is. It's from trauma. But for me, it's funny because I just remember in my head thinking she is really on one right now. I wonder when she's going to stop hitting me, because it really was just bam, 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 just really going to town with that chancla and me just absorbing, And so, but before she had lost it, she had called my dad and told him that, I remember the way she used to talk to him in regards to me, where she'd be like, I can't deal with your son anymore. You need to do something about this. This is your son. You handle it. That's the way she would, because, obviously I'm the boy. So, with my sisters, my mom's more in charge of that. And, I remember my sisters getting spanked every once in a while, but less than me because they're girls. And, girls don't, girls didn't typically do things that needed a lot of spankings. I remember one time my sister, I don't remember what this is the kind of kid I was, when I was little, this is me. I want to say I was like 5 or 6 years old. And my sister, Aleki, she was my best friend. She's the one that died. Figures my best friend would die. That's the way my life works. I'm still here, though. I'll be here forever. But everybody around me will die, though. Trust me. Not my fault. I'm not going to do it. Don't take that way, you guys. That's not what this video is. Could you imagine if this was like my manifesto? But I would never be stupid enough to put out a manifesto. If I ever ticky boom, it's just going. I'm probably going to be as surprised as everybody else. Because a lot of times when I lose it, even verbally, right after, I'm like, why did you do that? We said we weren't going to do that. Like, we're not being like that. But anyway. So she had called my dad and told him that he needed to handle me, and then I guess she went to talk to me. I don't remember exactly how that part went down. I don't remember exactly what I did, but I do remember that somehow she ended up approaching me and it didn't go the way she wanted it to. And so she really did beat the shit out of me with that chancla, and she didn't bother communicating. That's why if you're going to do corporal punishment, that's what it is, right? Corporal punishment is spanking. Capital punishment is death penalty. I'm sure they would have loved to have capital punishment on certain points. But if you're going to do corporal punishment on any level, do communicate with each other, parents. Because what happened was she didn't tell my dad that she had already handled it. So I had already got my whooping for whatever it was she was upset about. And my dad didn't bother consulting with her before he came to my room. So what happened was they didn't cross paths in the living room. I was still in my room after getting that monster ass whooping from my mom. I was still in my room minding my own business, licking my wounds, you could say. I don't remember what I was doing. I just remember I was in my room. And my dad came in and, with his belt and gave me a good whooping. And so I ended up getting 2 in one day, kind of back to back. And a couple days later, though, was when my dad apologized to me. And he told me, and this is a big part of why I probably don't have hard feelings. Because my dad, even though he is you could say a traditional Chicano man. I want to be very clear, because even though we are Mexican, we're Mexican American, and Chicano is the slang for Mexican American. And there is a difference between Chicano and Mexican. In a lot of cases when I was growing up, I would misspeak too and refer to myself as being Mexican. But there is something to being Chicano, Mexican American, which is what I was raised and what I was always told when I was a kid. Just Mexican used to be shorthand, but there is definitely a difference. I wasn't born or raised in Mexico. I don't speak Spanish. There's a lot about me that is not traditionally Mexican, but I am 100% Latino. My raising, my family, even the way that I personally live is very much Chicano, even though a lot of people consider me whitewashed, but even that's a part of being Chicano. It's a part of the Chicano experience, is a lot of us are whitewashed because of the way that we were raised. But my dad's very much a Chicano man and doesn't show a lot of emotion. He's not at all a sappy guy, even though as he gets older, that's one of the things that I do appreciate in getting to see him get older, is that, you know, he is like softer, but he gets to be, you know, he doesn't have to be the dad anymore. He can be more like a friend, you know, because when you get to a certain age, or what I've noticed with my dad is that when they get to a certain age, they do soften a bit more and are able to tell you more things. I guess you just have to live to that point and be willing to trust that process, is what I would tell some people that still have resentments. Because I know a lot of people that are like in their 40s and older and still have unresolved with their parents. And I get that. I don't judge them, because not everybody was as fortunate as I was to have parents that would actually apologize to you. Because that's what I'm getting at, is my dad did take me, you know, in that same room I got beat in. And he had a conversation with me where he told me that he was sorry and that he does have to respect that I am a young man and that he can't just continue hitting me. Like, that's not going to get anywhere. And he had seen that it really wasn't working, and all it was doing was making me not like them. It wasn't scaring me. It wasn't really, like, yeah, physically did it hurt, especially when my dad with his strength would take his belt and hit me. Yeah, of course it did. But was the pain really teaching me anything other than that I could absorb pain? Because at a certain age, that's all you're learning, you know. Like, I'm not comparing this, and I'm never, like I said, I'm not telling you at all what you should do as parents. If there's any parents watching this, this is not me doing that at all. This is legitimately telling you how it is my thinking has formed and what it felt like from the child point of view, you know, like, and so that's really all I learned, was that I was able to absorb pain. And to this day, I do not love pain. I do not like pain. Pain is not something that I subject myself to in any kind of way to seek pleasure. But I definitely can handle pain. That's why you see the tattoos and the piercings and stuff like that. And it's not really something I'm afraid of walking through. And so I think that may have been important in forming me, the person. Even though it may not have been the most pleasant, that might have been one of the lessons that I needed to learn, because I think we all have to learn different lessons, and the people in our lives are there to teach us those lessons, whether they're doing them intentionally or not. Like, did my parents spank me in order to teach me that I could endure pain, whether it's, you know, at the gym? Because like I told you guys, I'm doing this thing now where I'm doing calisthenics and I'm getting better at it, and it's nothing I want to show yet, but I am getting much better at it. But that does come from not being afraid to actually deal with the pain when you're holding certain situations or holding certain poses, which was also helpful in yoga, but also, you know, discipline in general. I got from the way that I was raised, because my parents would, they had me in karate when I was younger. And when I say I was in karate, I went to karate 5 days a week, I believe. You know, I had to be there 5 days a week. And so that's a lot of where I developed my discipline, because whether you want to go or not, you just have to, you know. And, so yeah, so my dad legitimately apologized to me for it and acknowledged that, you know, he was wrong for especially the recent times he had done it. And that went a long way for me. And it wasn't uncommon, even leading up to that point, that he would apologize for me, because, you know, he wasn't that person, like, you know, he would spank me and then he'd apologize and then he'd spank me again. It wasn't like that. There was one talk. All the other spankings I had to all the other spankings he felt good about. I don't think he did. I really think it did pain him. Like, this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you mentality. I really do feel like that was my dad's plight when he even did have to discipline me, because that was the standard way that you discipline children when I was younger. And so it was something that he had to do. And I know there's going to be some people who are like, I'm Gen X and I wasn't raised that way. You know, I know there's going to be some people in the audience that are, I'm Gen X and I wasn't raised that way. I get that. And that's kind of like, the point of me getting to know different people and also letting people get to know me. Is I get that some people didn't deal with that. I dealt with or knew kids when I was younger that didn't get spankings from they were bad as hell, but they didn't get spankings from their parents. They usually called their moms by their first names, but they didn't get spankings when they were younger, and I respect that too. Like, that's my whole thing, is like, I tell my stories the way that I tell them. And in a lot of cases, even though I'll sometimes speak somewhat in generalities, it really is meant to be specific. Like, I'm talking about me, my thinking, my experience, what I dealt with my parents. But I do mean what I say. Like, it is good advice, I think, to tell people that if you're gonna spank your kids, you need to communicate with each other. Because that 2 whoopings in one day, it was funny to me. Because, after it was all said and done, I did get a laugh out of that, how it was just I got beat twice today. Like, what is happening to my life? It's really spiraled out of control. I need a drink. Somebody get me a Coke and Bacardi. But now I don't drink Coke and Bacardi ever. I mean, I'm not saying I never would. Who knows? But I very rarely drink anymore. Anyway, but and so but what I was saying about my dad is I think that's a part of why I do love him so much and I do respect him so much, is because throughout my childhood, he would regularly tell me when he was wrong for something, like if he shouldn't have talked to me a particular way, or if there was something that he didn't like about the way that he dealt with me in a particular situation, or maybe where I could have been subjected to, like, a little bit of embarrassment because, you're not, and now I understand that so well, because sometimes I think about the age that my dad was when he was dealing with me, and then I would think about myself at that same age, and I would be like, I don't know how I would have dealt with a child if I had had one at that age, and the stress of having to support an entire family. And none of this is to excuse, just to be clear, any of the spanking or things that some people would consider to be, like past that line, or maybe bad parenting, even though, like I said, it was the standard and it was everybody when I was young, or almost everybody when I was younger. But that's what my friend, the psychiatrist, ended up like trying to get on me about. I remember, because he has a German accent, and he was like, no, you do not make it your responsibility. This is what victims do. And I just thought to myself, well, I always blame the victim, especially when the victim is me. Like, this was before I was really vocalizing those kinds of things, because a lot of the stuff that I've had in my head, I haven't wanted to tell a lot of people, because I knew a lot of people wouldn't really understand it, because that is the way that a lot of people see it. And I'm very thankful for my YouTube audience, because I think a lot of people are getting what it is I'm saying now. Like, you can wish for the perfect world, but the perfect world isn't going to happen. Like, I remember some people got mad at me because there was a time where Patty Smythe from The Pretenders recalled when she had been raped. And she was talking about, and it was a big deal. You can search it online. So excuse me for paraphrasing, because this one I didn't do research on. I just remember when it was happening and it was a hot topic. This was probably in like 2016, 2017, that she had done this interview where she talked about that. And she was saying that, she kind of replays it in her head and thinks maybe if she hadn't been wearing heels that made it hard for her to run and be able to protect herself, maybe if, and I'm again paraphrasing. So when you read the article, if you decide to, which I encourage you to, because I think maybe some people would understand what I'm saying about this, is that she was kind of like, victim blaming herself in the way where she was saying, like, and I'm not at all, don't get me wrong, this I'm going to be very clear on. I'm not saying that no matter what a person wears that they deserve that, or that you shouldn't dress the way you want to dress, or I'm not saying any of that stuff. That's not at all what my point is in this. And that's where some people get me wrong, is they'll hear like the first part of something that I'm saying and they'll be like, oh, you're going to go in and victim blame and justify people raping people because they're wearing. No, I'm not at all saying that. And that's where I think a lot of people got me wrong at the time, was I wasn't saying that. What I was saying was, I think what Patty Smyth was, because people came down on her, but I think that what she was trying to convey was very similar to my thinking, is that the world isn't going to change. As much as, and at the same time, it does change, and it has changed. So that's not true. But it's not going to change at the pace we want it to always, and it's never going to be perfect. That's the way I would put it, because the world clearly has changed. We have gay marriage. We've had a black president. We have trans people living out in the open as much as they complain. Like, the world has changed so much. If you had told me these things were going to be possible or even happen when I was a kid, I would have told you, no, they're not. I would have told you were crazy, because it was that far away from it. Even having a black president, people would have laughed at you if you said that there was going to be a black president, because we all knew that there was not going to be a black president. That wasn't going to happen. Jesse Jackson had tried, and you can try if you want to, but it ain't going to happen. And then Barack Obama happened. And so the world has changed. Like I said, gay marriage, that wasn't even, like, nobody thought about that. You keep that lifestyle to yourself, was the way it was seen. What you do behind closed doors is not my business, was the most liberal people were about those things. And a lot of people weren't even there. A lot of people said that it was an abomination. A lot of people, might still be. A lot of people say, believe me, I lived the life, if anybody can tell you. But a lot of people said things like that. And that was the common sentiment. You keep that perverted shit behind closed doors, was the way people felt. Not like what you do is your business behind the door. No, if you want to be a pervert, if you want to be disgusting, if you want to have relationships with people of the same sex, you keep it behind closed doors. That's the way people felt. And so the world is changing, and people are more sensitive about those things, and people do understand that, because when I was younger also, like, sexual assault and that kind of stuff wasn't really like a thing that people thought was a big thing either. That's when people were actually blaming each other for the way that they dressed, or like, behaving in a certain way. There were things that people could do to deserve it in a lot of people's minds when, we were younger. But what I was getting at with Patty Smyth was I compared it to a car accident, because people were coming down on her. And I don't think people should ever really come down on people for the conclusions that they come to through life experiences that have happened to them personally. So if a person goes through something like that, any way that they express or let you know the way that they were able to cope with it, or what they actually were to gain from it. Because even though these terrible things will happen in our lives sometimes, I think there always is something that can be gained even from the worst experiences. And I truly do believe that the worst experiences, there's always something, even if it's just a nugget. And sometimes the most important nuggets come from the most traumatic situations. And when I say traumatic in that context, I'm not at all poo-pooing it or putting it in air quotes. I really do mean the most traumatic situations sometimes you learn the most from, and it's the hardest to learn, but at the same time, it's what's going to help you the most moving forward, or at least that's been my experience. And so what I think she was doing was, I compared it to like a car accident. Like, when you get in a car accident, even if it's 100% not your fault, like, you can't help but just replay it in your head, where you're like, maybe if I had waited longer at that stop sign, they would have seen me. Or maybe if, I had not chosen to like gun it when the light turned green, or, whatever the situation was. And you can't believe it, and you keep replaying it in your mind, and you think, well, what can I do differently? And like I said, even if you're completely not at fault in that car accident, you still will try to think about what you can do, or at least I will, try to think about what you can do moving forward so that you don't end up in that predicament again. Because no matter how much we try, other people are still going to do unsafe things. Other people are still going to be, in some cases, conniving. Other people are still going to, try to take advantage of you in certain cases. Other people are still going to occasionally talk about you behind your back, or in some cases outright say things that are untrue about you. This is something that I've dealt with a lot in my life. And so I will, in a lot of cases, think about how I can make it so that that doesn't happen again, like safeguard myself from that. And like when it comes to Patty Smythe and her situation, I don't think that there's anything wrong with thinking about things like that, because sometimes if you are in a wobbly set of shoes, in a pair of high heels, and you're going to be out super late at night, maybe you should bring the big bag along with you that you can actually fit some tennis shoes in, so that when you're walking, you're not at risk, but you're more able to actually defend yourself. Like a friend of mine not too long ago, we were just talking about it the other night, and she has a really good attitude about it, but a person held a knife to her neck, I think, or held a knife to her, and tried to carjack her, or try to jack her. And she doesn't feel at all traumatized by it, because she ended up handling it, in her mind, and in mine too, because obviously she didn't get jacked, she didn't get stabbed, she didn't get assaulted. Everything worked out well, but she was able to keep that from happening. I guess he did something stupid, and she just didn't go into panic mode, and she was able to jump in her car. And then once she jumped in her car, she backed up and basically let him know through her car's body language that I could hit you right now. I could just run you over with this car and this will be done. But she realized that she didn't want that on her conscience, so she kept herself from actually doing that. And it's an actual thing. Like, she even hurt herself in the process of doing it, or he hurt her. I don't remember. I need to start retaining more, and at some point that'll happen. But I get the highlights a lot of times when people are talking, and this is one of my good friends. Like, I really do like this person a lot. She and her husband are I would honestly say two of my favorite people in the world. But yeah, I really love them. But she was talking about it, and it's a similar thing though, where it's like she had her wits about it. And so while maybe some people would come along and be like, no, you need to understand that you went through a traumatic situation, and this can be a lot. And if she's like, somebody did something stupid, they pulled a knife on me, they were trying to jack me, I was able to keep my wits about me, it didn't actually happen, why should I feel traumatized about that? Why should I feel like I need to talk to a therapist if I don't need to talk to a therapist? Now, and also on the other side, if you do go through something like that, and you feel that you're traumatized and you do need to speak with somebody, you need to talk to a therapist, then you do that. I think that's valid too. That's why I say none of my stuff is like a one size fits all. None of this is saying that every single person should do this. But I am saying that what I have noticed is that always blaming the victim, especially when I'm the victim, is a way that I can feel empowered, because I know that I can change my behavior. Like, I snapped at an IKEA person the other day, and I'll tell you this story and then we'll wrap it up, because we're coming to the end of Unbothered. If you know Unbothered, I don't like to make it over an hour, and if it does go over an hour, it's not going to be by much. And but yeah, so I snapped at the IKEA lady, and yeah, she didn't know how to talk to me. That's why I snapped at her. She talked to me like I was a child, and I don't even have to go to the specifics of this story because it's kind of inconsequential, and we're on a crunch for time right now. But what happened was, she talked to me like a child. And so I just outright snapped at her, and I was like, yeah, people don't talk to me like that. And I really, was like, you can grab your manager or whatever you want to do. If you think I'm in trouble right now, let's go ahead and run this down and see if I'm really in trouble. And then she let me know she was a manager, and I felt like, you have terrible people skills if you're a manager. But she turned out to be the person I needed to talk to because I needed something done. And so I was like, oh, you're a manager. And so she didn't apologize to me for talking in the way that she talked to me, but she did correct her behavior and start helping me with what I actually needed. And not only did she help me, she also was, I also realized in her helping me that she doesn't know how to talk to people. Like, there were points where she was talking to me like, stand right there, wait there, and it was just like, in my head, there's a part of me that feels, again, like that default of like, that's not the way people talk to me. Because even though I look like this, you'd be surprised how nice people are to me and how well I get treated almost everywhere I go. It's very rare that people, and when I was younger, it wasn't that way. I have times where it was, but I realized that was more the way I was coming at the world than the way the world was coming at me. So anyway, I realized that she really was just this type of person, but also I needed her help. So I needed something from her, And so, which I ended up getting everything that I needed at IKEA. So there was that. And also I was a bit frustrated because I'm a person that does get frazzled in IKEA, because there's that point where you just want to leave and there's so many other things. And I was there for a couple of things. It was very specific what I was doing there. And so I was on a mission, and now I'm stuck. And then I'm trying to go this particular way, and I can't find how I'm supposed to go there, and that's what it all came from. And so I was already flustered, and so part of that snapping wasn't necessarily for her. She didn't necessarily need that. But I did realize that she just didn't know how to talk to people. And so I decided to make it an exercise in my dealing with her to just not react to those triggers that I have to being talked to that particular way, and just absorb that and accept. And I know that I'm probably old to be accepting this, but we learn our lessons when we learn them. But just accept that certain people there are always going to be certain people like that in the world. There are always going to be certain people that don't know how to talk to you, or don't talk to you with the way that you, no edits, or that don't talk to you exactly the way that you want to be talked to. And so while I can't change her or the other people like that, or make it so that there will never be people that I encounter like that again in my life, what I can do is adjust my behavior. What I can do is next time take a beat, and before I react and snap at a person, just remember that they may be the type of person that doesn't know how to talk to people. And then if it turns out that they are giving me attitude, then I'll snap on those motherfuckers the way that they need it. But outside of that, stay unbothered.